Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Health and Safety at Work webinar. And today we're going to be talking about directors' responsibilities with regards to health and safety. Just a couple of introductions before we start. My name's Dom Greenwood. My role with HR Solutions and Essential Safety is I'm a Senior Health and Safety and Environmental Management Consultant, quite a long title there. But another part of my role is I undertake national safety training courses. So I deliver health and safety, fire safety, food safety, and probably the most important and the biggest one I've been delivering since the return of COVID is mental health. So there's definitely an appetite there for mental health training, first aid and safeguarding. So that's a little bit about me. Also on the webinar today, in the background, making sure that everything's working properly, is Rebecca Johnson, and her role is Marketing Manager with HR Solutions as well. Everybody is in listen-only mode due to the amount of people, so you'll find that naturally you're on mute. And there is a way to ask questions. If you look at your panel, it will tell you quite specifically how to do that. So please continue to submit your questions. What we have found on the last few webinars is we're getting so many questions come through, is that rather than answer questions live, we often produce a frequently asked questions document and send that out. So we've already had 3 or 4 questions. So if we have too many more, we'll probably send something out after the webinar. So we'll let you know about that one. We will be running some polls throughout the webinar. I think there's 4 today. So when you see this slide come up on the webinar, it means that we're ready to run a poll, and I'll then flash a question up, which will then elicit a yes or no response from yourselves, and then we'll have a quick chat about the responses. So throughout the webinar, there will be some polls for you to actively get involved with. Okay, so if we come back and start the webinar, the agenda today really is talking about the role of a director, and I'm hoping that there's a number of directors on the call. I'm aware that there's a few directors on the call and also senior managers and senior leaders. We're going to talk about what safety laws there are for directors to be aware of, and there are a number, and there's a number of regulations that also drop out of those safety laws as well. We're going to talk about something called Section 37, which is actually the part of the Health and Safety at Work Act that pertains directly to directors and senior managers, which you need to be aware of. I'm going to show you some case studies as well, where Section 37 was used to prosecute directors for failings for health and safety and various practices in the workplace. So as I just said, we're going to look at some HSE prosecutions. There's a whole raft out there, to be honest, and I'd advise everybody on the call to not only be aware of the HSE website, which is hse.gov.uk, but also there's an HSE media centre where all prosecutions go, and I check that quite regularly. Loads of sectors are represented on there, but you can then have a really good idea of what the HSE are looking at and whether there's any directors' prosecutions on there as well. We're going to talk about and think about what can directors do in the workplace. Some company directors are really active in talking to staff and and being actively involved in what goes on in the business, but others aren't. And so thinking about what can directors do to play a more active role. How can we help you as a business? You'll be aware that we look after HR, various payrolls, training, recruitment, but a big part of what we do is obviously health and safety consultancy and advice to clients, and thinking about how we can help you with maybe some training or policies or documents. There'll be information on the next series of webinars. We generally run a webinar per month. This month we're doing 2. In a couple of weeks' time we're doing fire safety. Actually, it's next week, fire safety in the workplace, but there's other ones coming up as well. And then, as I said earlier, some bits on training courses that we can advise directors potentially to have a look at. Some of which I've done myself, and so I've got first-hand knowledge of some really good ones that you could be involved with. Okay, so let's make a start. So directors and senior officers' responsibilities. So the HSE suggests that directors and boards need to, and this is taken directly from the HSE website, review the health and safety performance regularly. So, and again, I'm not sure what positions everyone on the call holds, but it'd be worth thinking about whether, if you're a director or a senior leader, do you review the health and safety performance regularly? Now, it could be that you've got an appointed person in the workplace, a competent person, a health and safety director, a site safety manager. So it could be that that person would be reviewing the health and safety performance, but it's absolutely worth thinking about how much interest and response you take to health and safety performance in the business. Ensure that health and safety policy statements reflect current board priorities. So I'm hoping that everybody's got a health and safety policy and a health and safety policy statement. That is a legal requirement. But again, does it reflect what the board want to do with the company? Are board members looking at the health and safety policy? Is it being reviewed on a regular basis? Or has it been the same for 3, 4, 5 years? What I am finding on my travels, I work with about 40 clients across the UK, across 13 different sectors, from leisure to retail to construction to care, and a number of others, is that since returning back from COVID, a number of policies, risk assessment, systems of work, training has kind of been left, purely because some companies were mainly working from home, but also the workplaces weren't as busy, and it wasn't seen as a priority to look at this so much. So it's absolutely worth now going back to make sure policies, procedures, risk assessments and training is now up to date, and the board understand that they've got to review and agree those policies. Ensure that management systems provide effective monitoring and reporting procedures. So hopefully you've got a health and safety management system. It doesn't mean that you've got to have a digital system and it's got to do loads of different things for you. The old kind of paper-based folder system is more than good enough. But does it provide effective monitoring? Can you, as a director, see how health and safety is monitored in the workplace, whether that's through audits and reviews, inspections, training, and how is that then reported? Is it through reports, check sheets? You'll know what you're doing, and obviously if you don't know what's going on, it'd be absolutely worth as a director to go around the workplace and talk to staff and department managers to see what is happening. Respond to significant health and safety failures and of the outcome of investigations. So firstly, are health and safety failures, accidents, incidents reported and then investigated? And then at a board level and senior leadership level, are you getting actively involved in that? And then thinking about what control measures to put in so it doesn't happen again, whether it's been reported to RIDOR, which is the HSE's reporting mechanism for incidents and accidents. And then just what are the board going to do to try and caveat that from happening again. Ensure that implications in respect of health and safety are addressed in all decisions. So thinking about health and safety as as the forerunner to all meetings, decisions, training. It is often forgotten about because people think it's not an income driver. However, the misconception really is that if health and safety is not delivered properly and correctly, then it would probably cost a great deal more than it would have done when it was put in place in the first place. And we're going to look at that when we look at some of the HSE prosecutions. Ensure that risk management systems for health and safety are in place and effective. So that could be risk assessment, safe systems of work, hazard analysis, controls, but also it could be you've got digital systems that need to be looked at as well. So thinking about what are your risk management systems in the workplace. And as we said earlier, if you've got a safe site manager or competent person, checking in with them, having one-to-ones, setting objectives to make sure they understand that risk management systems are in place. And a big one really, and probably the biggest and most important one, is communication. Are the board, our directors communicating with staff, stakeholders and workers on safety matters and training? Do you get around the workplace? Do you know what staff do? Do you understand the equipment, the machinery, and the risks that could be in the workplace? And obviously if the answer is no, then it'd be great for you to get around and talk to senior managers and staff. Just a couple more. Understand and ensure that implications and duties imposed by acts of Parliament, statutory instruments. So there's a number of statutory compliance items that every business in the UK would need to have. Things like insurance, health and safety management system, risk assessments, a competent person, things like gas safety, electrical safety, vehicles, all that kind of stuff. As a company, is that being put in place? Are the HSE guidance notes and code of practice being brought into the attention of the directors? There's a number of what they call ACOPs, approved codes of practice, that the HSE produce for a number of different things. As we said, electricity at work, gas falling from height, all that kind of stuff. Are you aware of that, and is the board aware that they need to be bringing those into the workplace? To bring company-related health and safety matters to the attention of board of directors at regular intervals, as we said earlier, at the start or at some point through every board meeting and senior leadership meeting, it would be absolutely imperative to talk about the health and safety performance of the organisation, the accident profile of the organisation. Have there been any incidents, maybe insurance claims? And if that's not currently on the agenda, it would be absolutely worth doing that. We already talked about the communications that exist between employer and employees. To liaise with the person appointed in that role. So I mentioned earlier, it could be you've appointed a health and safety director or a site safety manager, or just someone with the title of a competent person. What kind of liaison are you having with them, or is the board having with that person? Are they bringing in accident statistics, training requirements, and concerns over control measures or equipment or whatever it might be? So thinking about involving that person with decision making, but also as a voice to kind of front some of those concerns in a board meetings. Distribution and communication of health and safety and welfare information obtained for the HSE and various different safety organisations and trade associations. So what is the communication strategy at the business like? Is it done through kind of email or Teams, or is there a notice board? Is there a health and safety channel? So it's worth thinking about how the information does get disseminated down to the staff and unit managers. And again, training is coming up, making sure that there is adequate programs of training for people with regards to using equipment, their actual job role, what they're supposed to be doing and are doing for the company, and that there's a positive safety culture in the workplace. And again, a massive one there would really be setting a personal example at all times by wearing the correct personal protective equipment and clothing, rather than just walking straight out of the office into the warehouse. If you're supposed to be wearing maybe overshoes or safety boots, then absolutely do that as well, because workers and staff will notice that isn't happening. If you need to wear a high-vis jacket or a helmet or goggles or whatever that might be, then whilst you're only going to go in there for 2 or 3 minutes to have a quick chat with somebody, it'd be absolutely imperative to put that on, to show the workforce that you're taking health and safety as importantly as everyone else. So I kind of put together a 5-stage approach really, and strategy would be absolutely the first thing to think about, with directors' safety role in agreeing and driving forward the strategy. And it could be that you are a health and safety director. It could be that you've got that responsibility, maybe as an operations director or as a managing director, but kind of setting that culture out there so that everybody knows. And it could be a briefing document, a directive. It could be that you've got a drop dead date that from so and so we're going to change the culture of the organisation. And change is often difficult, but it needs to be driven and obviously taken forward by somebody. An opportunity to explore the benefits of a beyond compliance approach. So it's not just about hitting the kind of 10 or 12 compliance items that the company needs, but what are we going to do beyond that? How can we maintain a safe accident profile? Could it be that some health and safety aspects are brought into your visions and values and aims and objectives, rather than it just being about customers and maybe income generation? As we already talked about, core actions at board level, so consideration of the essential principles of planning for health and safety, reflecting the importance of the topics as corporate governance issues, and then implications of potential things like corporate manslaughter and things like that. Insurance, the PR aspect. Should you be taken to a prosecution, or there be an accident or a major incident in the workplace? That has to start at the top. That has to be talked about in the board. And all the board members need to be brought into the same mindset, so that you're all singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak, and that health and safety is brought into board meetings and senior leadership meetings. Thinking about then how you're going to deliver that message. So exploration of the directors and senior managers' role in building health and safety into the organisation. How is that going to happen? There's absolutely no point talking about things in board meetings if then it doesn't then get filtered down to unit managers, department managers, site managers, and then obviously supervisors, and then the workforce or the operatives. Do you publish your director meetings? Can you create an abridged document so that all the workers can see what you're doing? Can you put something on Teams, or use maybe social media or different platforms to do that? Is there adequate resources, access to competent advice, worker involvement at all levels? So thinking about maybe using external companies like myself. There's a number of companies and clients I work with that have got an internal health and safety director, health and safety competent person, who are well qualified to a consultant level, but also want an external viewpoint, an extra set of eyes and hands really to overlook policies, procedures, and get involved at a more senior level. So thinking about how you can deliver that message back to the workforce. Monitoring and review. So the significance of adopting a practical approach to ensure health and safety issues are addressed competently and systematically. So yeah, so it's great to have things written down on paper, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, the other. But is it actually happening? How is it being monitored? And is it being reviewed? So are you doing things like internal audits, inspections, various check sheets throughout the day? You know, daily, weekly, monthly check sheets, equipment check sheets, things like that. Is that being then reviewed, and our findings being taken back to, as we said, the senior leaders to maybe allocate funds? And as a director, you know, have you got sight of all this kind of monitoring and review documents and audits? Because it'd be great that you could then review those, and maybe every now and again think about shadowing the health and safety manager to see how that process works. And then the last on the fifth stage would be the inputs, outputs, and outcomes. So thinking about reviewing of case studies, you know, looking at the HSE and various different companies that are like you, have loss events happened? Have there been any failings in outputs of the products and services? Equally, has there been case studies where what we call in the health and safety equation has been balanced? Is there new equipment or products or technology that can help balance the health and safety equation within your workplace? So it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour over the 5 stages that I've put together, but that's where I see directors can make a really significant inroads with regards to health and safety in the organisation. So just a quick slide there on the different laws and regulations that you need to be aware of as a director. The main one would be the Health and Safety at Work Act, the overarching piece of UK legislation. Dropping out of that would be the Management of Health and Safety at Work regulations. Separate piece of legislation that's not in the Health and Safety at Work Act is the Fire Safety Reform Order. And then depending on what kind of industry you're in would be the CDM, the Construction Design and Management Regulations. So literally a whistle-stop tour of these would be that the Health and Safety at Work Act is the primary piece of legislation covering all occupational health and safety in Great Britain, sometimes referred to as HASWA or HSWA. It sets out general duties, which are largely for the employer to manage the workplace in a way that keeps employers safe. So employers have towards employees and members of the public. It doesn't look at people working at home. However, obviously we're now in a culture where the home has become the workplace for various people. So, you know, 2 to 3, 4, 5 years ago that wasn't the case, but it now is. So thinking about duties with regards to home working would be really paramount as well. Dropping from that would be the Management of Health and Safety at Work regulations. So these were introduced really to help the Health and Safety at Work Act, because in 1992 there were 6 various different regulations introduced, and this was then reviewed in 1999. They explicitly outline what employers are required to do to manage health and safety in the workplace, and would cover various different things from the fabric of the building to welfare, training, and there's a number of other things. It also talks about competent person and the responsible person. So if you're not aware of that regulation, it'd be worth really having a good look at that. Fire Safety or the Fire Regulatory Reform Order, very, very long title there, provides a framework for all fire safety in all non-domestic premises. So if you're in the workplace, maybe in a leisure centre, a hotel, training centre, cinema, whatever it might be, the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order would absolutely need to be looked at, and there's various different parts of that, but it puts a duty on the employer and or building owners. So it's worth thinking about the building that you're in, because it could be that you lease or rent the building from a landlord, and it might be that they've said that don't worry, we're going to look after all the fire safety principles in the building, but that would still mean that you need to think about training fire marshals, fire wardens, looking at fire drills, fire safety in the workplace for things like waste and things like that. So it's worth looking at the Fire Safety Order 2005. And the last one then may not be appropriate to some of you on the call, because it is very construction led, but these are the CDM regs are the main set of regulations for managing the health and safety and welfare of all construction projects, and would include any kind of building, demolition, refurbishment, extensions, conversions, repairs and maintenance. Again, it's quite a detailed regulation there. If you're involved in the kind of construction sector, some parts of engineering, refurbishment, demolition, even small works. It's absolutely worth looking at the CDM regulations and the health and safety implications with that if you're a director. Just a quick quote there from the HSE. According to figures from the Health and Safety Executive of the HSE, the number of directors and managers prosecuted in recent years has more than doubled. That's worth thinking about that. And in stark contrast with this increase, the number of employees being prosecuted by the HSE is dramatically falling. So there's definitely a correlation now, and certainly the clients I'm dealing with and various different pieces of guidance and research I've looked at is that whilst the company can and often is prosecuted for various different health and safety failings, more and more directors and senior managers under Section 37, which we're going to talk about shortly, are being prosecuted as well, and that's been confirmed by the HSE with regards to that, with that quote. So just looking at Section 37, prosecuting senior management for occupational health and safety offences committed by someone else. So again, this is part of the Health and Safety at Work Act. So Section 37 of the Health and Safety Work Act is a principal provision governing personal liability of senior company personnel. Please don't think that just because you're not a director and you're maybe a health and safety manager or an operations manager that this wouldn't then be applicable to you. It absolutely would, because it talks about the negligence of a director, company secretary or senior manager, such as an individual is guilty of an offence as well as the company, and so can be liable to prosecution. So there's a number of senior roles there with regards to managers, secretaries and directors where they could be prosecuted under Section 37 if it can be seen that they knew about an offence that was taking place, they've turned a blind eye to something that was going on, and or haven't allowed maybe training to take place, the workplace hasn't been assessed properly, health and safety documents and policies have not been reviewed, have led to an accident or an incident. So Section 37 is definitely something to think about. It also contains a power to disqualify directors as a potential sentence for up to 2 years. And there's a case study that I'm going to show you shortly where a director was disqualified for 7 years due to their negligence in that particular company and the training and the accident that then happened. The people at the very top of the company need to be aware of the potential for individual fines and imprisonment if breaches are made to health and safety with their consent, connivance or neglect. So if you're allowing someone to do something, if you're kind of turning a blind eye to something that's going on, or if you're just not actioning something that's being brought up, or you're aware of something in your sector or industry that needs to be done. A good example of this would be if maybe a guard was taking off a piece of equipment and you were aware of that and you kind of said, no, that's fine. You carry on using that piece of equipment, and then a major accident happened. If it could be proved that you as a director or senior manager had allowed that to happen, you could then be potentially prosecuted, as could the company, under Section 37 of the Health and Safety at Work Act. The most important thing that directors and senior managers can do is to ensure that health and safety is a priority at all levels and that any issues and risks are reported to the highest level and acted on swiftly. Again, I do still see it on my travels across the UK that health and safety is often pushed to the kind of side because there's bigger priorities like sales, products, deliveries, customer service and things like that. Please don't do that. Please see health and safety as a priority, bring it into board meetings, senior managers meetings, and if there is a concern that's been brought up by a member of the team, even if they're at a very low level, please look at that. Create a paper trail, set up a meeting with their line manager, look at the product or the equipment or the machinery that they're suggesting, think about training, and then maybe put together an action plan so that should you be asked by the HSE or an environmental health officer what you've done, you can then talk about the meetings you've had, the correspondence you've had, the communication you've had, and the various different actions that you're going to put in place to rectify that situation. It's too late to act after the accident. Again, I regularly get asked about, well, we had this happen 2 weeks ago, what can we do now? Well, there are things you can do now. Obviously there is, but it's far better to have those things in place preceding the accident. Like we said earlier, whether it's risk assessments, training, communication, research, prevention, put the prevention measures in before and avoid being challenged on your legal, moral and contractual duties under the health and safety law. So there's a few parts of Section 37 there that I've just tried to pull out. It's absolutely worth just going back to Section 37 of the Health and Safety Work Act. If you Google that, you'll clearly see what it talks about, and you can then understand how that could affect you. Okay, we're going to run our first poll. I'm going to hand over to Rebecca. The question is going to be, do you feel that your directors, and I want you to include yourself with this if you're the only director, so this could be, do you feel that you or your directors understand the health and safety responsibilities that they have? I'm going to hand over to Rebecca.
Thanks, Dom. Yeah, just launching the poll, so if you can select your answer and then we'll have a look at that in a few moments once you've had the time to respond. Okay, I think most of you have voted now. So the results that we've got now are 71% said yes and 29% said no to the question, Dom.
Brilliant, and again, thanks for everybody for voting on that poll. For the 71% of you that said yes, great news. It sounds like your directors, your board, and potentially yourself have understood the health and safety responsibilities and know the implications. My concern now is with the 29% that don't, and it's thinking about how you then can maybe inform your directors, whether it's there's a number of courses I'm going to show you at the end. There's also some guidance documents from the HSE that you can show them, whether it's this presentation they can then access from YouTube when we put that link out there. I'm not sure, but thinking about how that 29% can then obviously move over to the yes side, because it is an important topic, and as we said, the more and more directors are being prosecuted, and it isn't a mitigation by saying, well, I wasn't aware of that, I've got a health and safety manager. I don't go to the business. I'm I'm just on the board. That won't work. If you're taking that position, it is a position of authority. It is an important position. So please do look at health and safety as a serious thing that could then impact on yourself and the business. So how can this affect you? Well, I've just put together some figures there. £26.9 million in fines were issued to duty holders found guilty with health and safety offences in 2020, 2021. So every year the Health and Safety Executive put together their health and safety statistics, which is great. They produce a report which is available from, as I said earlier, the hse.gov.uk website. It comes as a PDF, and you can then quite clearly see where different sectors are not performing as well as others, and various other different components. Interestingly, the average fine per case was £145,000. I mean, that seems like a big number to me. So if you're sitting there thinking, and what I'd like you to think about is, how would that figure affect our business? It may not be insured as well. It depends what insurance you've got. Would be, if you're found negligent, your insurance may not cover the fines that you may have handed down from the HSE. So the average fine was just shy of £150,000, and interestingly, in the previous year it was 107. So there has been a big increase there in just 1 year, and I wonder now, more and more businesses are back from COVID, whether that will then increase further. I'm not sure how well you can see the pictogram there, but I'll try to put that in as big as I can. But the average health and safety breaches per industry in 2020, and we've got various industries there that are highlighted, from utilities to services, manufacturing, construction, agriculture, with an average there. So you can see that utilities are still quite high, manufacturing, construction, and agriculture, and you can see obviously the orange line there that's just gone spiraled up as well. All these figures and statistics are available in that report. As I said, hse.gov.uk, or just Google health and safety statistics, and you'll be able to look at your industry and sector and see where which industry and sector are performing best. So as I said at the beginning, I've looked at some agency prosecutions. So company and the director were fined after worker sustained life-changing injuries, manufacture of concrete, architectural elements, and garden ornaments. So this isn't a construction company. This is a company that makes, those water features and kind of gnomes and things like that you have in your garden. The company and its director were fined after an employee suffered life-changing injuries because he got trapped in a kind of cement mixer. I appreciate that's a lot of text, so I'll just kind of overview that. But Nottingham Crown Court heard the employee was using the cement mixer at the company's premises to prepare and create concrete mix for ornamental castings. The employee attempted to stop the machine to retrieve something. However, he was allowed, and the machine allowed him to reach inside, and his arms came into contact with the mixing paddles. He managed to pull himself out, but unfortunately had to have his upper arm and right arm amputated, and also suffered various other injuries. The point that we're trying to make here is that from the research I've done, and also looking at the HSE's kind of statement, is the employee was allowed to do that, so the director was also fined. So under Section 37 of the Health Safety Work Act, he was fined. The director was fined £2,000 and disqualified from being a director, as I said earlier, for 7 years, then ordered to pay nearly £31,000 in costs. So it's not just the fine, because the fine, okay, £2,000. You think, well, okay, well, I'll take that. It's the amount of time it's taken to prepare the case, the hearing, the documents, witness statements, and everything else that costs. It's also the poor and bad PR, because we're now talking about this on a webinar, and I've actually used this example on a health and safety course recently as well, and I've seen this on other webinars and other health and safety courses. So this particular case is gaining momentum. So it's the PR that this particular company would get because people are talking about it. So there's an example there. The recent sentencing of a company director from Buckfastleigh in Devon in relation to the failing to ensure health and safety of companies underlines the importance of compliance. And again, it's quite wordy, but Celtic Rock Services pled guilty to Section 37 again and received a suspended 12-week sentence and a 12-week curfew with various legal costs there. Interestingly, on this one, I've looked at what went wrong, and it was both the director and the company failed to prevent 3 company employees from developing a syndrome called HAVS, which is hand, arm, and vibration syndrome. The work conducted by 3 employees included using heavy drilling and hammering machinery, often using the tools horizontally on cliffside sites. So interestingly, risk assessments completed failed to identify. So they had done risk assessments. So it may be that in their eyes they had looked at the risks, but could it be that somebody internal wasn't qualified or competent enough, and should they have used an external consultant or looked at industry guidance because they weren't seen as good enough, and they hadn't used the correct HAVS calculator. So HAVS is a hand and arm vibration syndrome, and there's an exposure calculator you can use to determine how long somebody can use that piece of equipment for. What does the law say? Well, again, you'll notice Section 37 has come up again, talks about the offence committed by a company senior manager or director, and the company were found guilty and fined £36,500 with a further £3,560 of costs. The company director was consequently found criminally liable for his part in this breach, and then that will stay on his or her record. Now, interestingly, if you've got a criminal record, you will then find it far more difficult to gain funding and work with charities and various other organisations, because they won't allow you to work with them if you've got a criminal record. So it's absolutely worth thinking about some of the things that you might do out of work. I've got a friend, unfortunately, that has got a criminal record due to a scuffle that happened a number of years ago, and he wanted to work with a local charity and they wouldn't allow him to because of the criminal record that came back when they did their DBS and due diligence checks. So it was nothing in relation to the charity whatsoever. It's just their policy. We don't allow any workers or volunteers with a criminal record. So it's worth thinking about that. The director and company is fined for failing to manage the risk of asbestos. So asbestos is still around. You'll be aware that it was a building material used in the 60s and 70s, but it was outlawed in 1999, and no company should use it since year 2000. However, asbestos is still around in a number of buildings, warehouses, workplaces, used in loft spaces, floors, around pipe work and that kind of thing. But in this particular case, the company pleaded guilty to breaching regulations of the control of asbestos regulations. So again, that's another regulation that drops out of the Health and Safety Work Act, and also it's in the CDM regulations. They were fined 51,000 and a further 30,000 of costs, so £80,000 there. And again, the director, Mr. Parks, was given a 12-month suspended prison sentence, fined £9,000 in order to pay a further £14,000 worth of costs, just because they hadn't looked at the asbestos in their workplace, which would have required probably an asbestos survey that would have cost, let's say, £1,000, and possibly some remedial works that, let's say, £5,000. So £6,000 could have sorted these asbestos out. I'm obviously using crude figures, but you can then the cost versus benefit of doing that, you can quite clearly see is much more in favour of reacting to the asbestos or health and safety issue at that time. Director jailed for 8 months, and the company was fined £700,000. That's a big number. Liverpool-based waste and the recycling company has been fined. Its director jailed after the death of a 39-year-old worker in a crushing incident involving a baler machine. The consequences to the director and the company in October 2018 were handed down, as we've seen, through Liverpool Crown Court under Section 2 of the Health and Safety Work Act. Section 2 talks about employees, so it's the duty holder's responsibility to employees. £700,000 there, and near another 100,000. But also the director, as we talked about, also pleaded guilty to Section 37 again, and he got an 8-month prison sentence. So think about whether if he's got a family, he's taken away for 8 months because of his part that he played or didn't play in the death of that 39-year-old worker. Okay, so just a few bits there on health and safety prosecutions. We're going to come on to our second poll, with the question being, is health and safety on the agenda at board meetings and senior team meetings in your company? And I'm going to hand back to Rebecca to put the poll up.
Thanks, Dom. Just sharing the poll now. So we've got yes, no, or unsure to this question if you're not 100% sure on that. So we'll just give you guys a few minutes to input your answers. It's almost quite evenly spread at the minute. Okay, so we've got 40% said yes, 20% said no, and 40% are unsure if it is on the agenda at board meetings or senior team meetings.
Not only yet. So it's 40, 20 and 20?
40, 20, 40.
40, 20, 40. I didn't think my maths were working quite well there. Okay, brilliant. Again, thank you everybody for taking part in that poll. So 40% have said yes. So again, it's difficult to know because I don't know the rank of people on the call, but certainly if you are a director, senior manager or senior team leader, you should know whether health and safety is on those agendas, because I'd like to think you'd be in some of those meetings. So I guess the action point there would really be, can we add health and safety to the agenda? Can we talk about, if it's only just a 5-minute slot, can we talk about the accident and health and safety performance of the business? Because it'd be great for directors to do that. 20% of you said no straight away. So again, it's thinking about, well, why is that? There's definitely more of a switch now for boards to become more involved with health and safety. Certainly if you're going for accreditations, ISO accreditations, various industry accreditations, it needs to be part of that. If you're going for funding, I've just been part of a tender process where one of my clients gone for a tender, and the tender they've gone for have specifically asked for senior leadership team meeting minutes where health and safety is talked about, what health and safety training have board members done, and what is the health and safety culture of the business. So it's absolutely worth doing that. And again, for the 40% of you that were unsure, go and find out. Ask some questions. It will be a yes, no, or unsure response. But again, I think that will give you then an idea of what you might need to do with reference to thinking about how health and safety could be put on with regards to that. So moving on, why is it important for directors to be interested in health and safety? Well, morally and ethically, it's absolutely the right thing to do. We've talked about it for the last kind of 40 minutes. If you're in a senior position or in a position of authority or on a board with that company, then you are saying is, I'm here to look after you, and I'm going to put in all the different control measures to make sure that all workers go home in the same, if not better, condition that they came in through the door. So morally and ethically, it's absolutely the right thing to do. People have got families, partners, friends, so we don't want anything happening to our workers whether it's at the workplace. And it's worth thinking about what happens when they go off the workplace. So a number of companies have different sites, second, third sites. They also travel abroad. They also go into people's homes, depending on what sector you're in. So it's not only thinking about what they do at the workplace, it's what happens when they leave the workplace to go. You don't have a choice. We've talked about 4 pieces of legislation earlier in the webinar. There's a number of other regulations that drop out of the Health and Safety at Work Act. We talked about asbestos as well. So you don't have a choice. And as we've seen, the Health and Safety Executive do take a very dim view on senior managers and leaders if this is not put in place. creating a positive culture and lead from the top. Workers, operatives, supervisors, they're not going to be anywhere near as positive about health and safety if you as a director or the board are not showing that positive culture. It won't work if it isn't driven from the top. So think about how you can do that. If it's a change thing, it might take 3, 6, 9, 12 months. So some of my clients that I'm now working with, that I started working with 12 months ago, I'm only really now seeing this happen because the directors are on board. We're involving directors in health and safety meetings, and we're talking to them about performance and statistics. So they can now see the correlation also to income, and that they're winning more tenders because of the accident profile and also the accreditations that they're getting. Management regulations, 1999, we talked about, require policy, process and risk assessments. So as a director, ask the question, have we got a health and safety policy? What health and safety processes do we have? Can I have a look at the risk assessments? Are they just drop down off Google? Are they templates, or has someone actually really thought about the risks and hazards in the business? I've just alluded to this earlier, but winning business tenders are asking for document suites and proof of management training and development. Insurance companies as well. I've done a number of fire risk assessments and health and safety policy reviews recently because insurance companies are now taking a more proactive view of health and safety in the workplace with reference to the liability. We talked about funding earlier to attract investors and partners and demonstrate commitment to health and safety. Accident profile, I've just mentioned this, increasingly being asked for by insurance companies. If you don't know what your accident profile is, then just think about how many accidents have you had. There's simple equations you can look at divided by the amount of days in the month and days in the year. But it could be that if you've got more than one site, you might have to think about how you're going to do that. And there's a number of tools you can get offline, very inexpensive to look at accidents. But as a minimum, thinking about having an accident book and an accident and investigation process. And again, thinking about using an external consultant. We're one company that could help you with this. There are many others, but thinking about an external profile view. Your PR will be far more positive. I'm seeing on LinkedIn more and more regularly, companies celebrating we've had no accidents or incidents this quarter. Our accident profile is X, Y, and Z. We've employed a regional health and safety and accident coordinator. So companies on LinkedIn, I'm seeing far more positive PR, which leads to good reputation and a good and positive public image. Staff turnover, staff work and feel better in a safe environment. There's a number of research pieces out there that would suggest that staff work harder, better, and more cohesive if there is a positive health and safety environment. This was the document I was alluding to earlier, and it's really good. I've used this on training courses before. It is free. This is the HSE NDG 417 document, and it is Leading Health and Safety at Work, action for directors, board members, business owners, and organisations of all sizes. It is a free resource that you can actively download from the HSE website, or if you Google the Institute of Directors guidance, it will come up. It's really good because it sets a direction for health and safety management. As we've already talked about, it talks about health and safety appearing regularly on agendas for board meetings. The presence on a board of a health and safety director can be a strong signal that the issue is being taken seriously. So the company I worked for before, for 9 years, I was head of compliance. I wasn't a director and I wasn't on the board, but every director's meeting and board meeting, I was given a slot for 10 minutes to talk about the estate, accidents, incidents, and what training had happened. That was then minuted, and obviously any actions then resolved. So you could put a health and safety director in, or you could allow a delegate to come into those meetings to talk about it. Health and safety should be integrated into key governance structures, including board subcommittees such as risk, remuneration, and audits. So it doesn't just stop in the boardroom; it needs to be rolled throughout the organisation. But all of this kind of stuff we're talking about today is on there. So please do look at that and download that document. Health and safety arrangements are adequately resourced. So unfortunately, health and safety is still seen as, oh, can you do a little bit of health and safety? My response to that is, which bit would you like me to do? But it's a continuum. The tabs down the side of the booklet, plan, do, check and act, or plan, deliver, monitor and review, sets out the 4 key stages that directors can then help their safety people and safety teams work with. And the reason you want to do that is because there are new sentencing guidelines that came out in 2016. They were reviewed again in 2018, and it's now derived on the size of the company. So in 2018, new guidelines were issued to judges which increased prison sentences for people convicted of gross negligence manslaughter in a workplace setting. It's now based on the company's turnover from large, small and a micro organisation. The possibility of not being insured if you're found guilty, and again Section 37 of the Health and Safety at Work Act, is a potential for prosecution of company director and senior officers. As we talked earlier, the judge and jury have the potential to sentence as well as convict and imprison for up to 2 years. And as we said earlier, can also disqualify a director for that period of time. So what would the consequences of an HSE prosecution be? We've already seen there's big fines. I think the biggest one we talked about today was 700,000. I think there was one for 145,000. I think there were various other ones for 50 and 30,000. But equally, it could be that some of those fines are going to be sat with you as a director for 2 to 5 to 10,000. You then face the possibility of being struck off, and then you then couldn't be a director for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And also, as we said, may not then be able to do any volunteering work for a charity or gain any funding. Your poor PR as a company and as a director would be obviously put on potentially social media. Every HSE prosecution is held and is made available. So if somebody wants to Google whether or not you were involved in that prosecution, it would come up. Freedom of Information Act would suggest that you could look at that, and it is widely available. Loss of business contracts and tenders, loss of funding, insurance premiums could rise, and again we've got social media and various news. You don't want an HSE prosecution, and if you do, you want to be able to defend it in the right way. So just thinking about what can directors do to improve health and safety. Well, we talked about a few of these already, but talking about health and safety as an agenda item on board meetings, senior leadership team meetings, senior managers meetings, and actively look at actions that were set from the previous meeting and make sure they've been at least looked at and different pathways put in place. Set goals and targets. Why can't you have a health and safety goal? We all do income expenditure targets and goals, set budgets and things like that, but it could be that you're going to set an aim, an objective about only having X amount of accidents per quarter, and then dropping that down to a lower level over the next quarter. So setting realistic goals and targets for health and safety. Visibility in the business by talking to workers and visiting sites. I still see this on a regular basis. MD, CEOs and directors not getting around their workplaces to talk to staff. Some companies are brilliant at doing this. Some companies are poor. You've got new people joining the business, go and say hello, shake their hand and tell them what you do. Actively go around and look at what they're doing in their work areas. Get them to explain their role to you, so that one, that they feel sort of important, that you're taking an interest, but also that you understand that they're doing it correctly. Engage the workforce in the promotion and achievement of safe and healthy conditions. So thinking about what is the workplace like? Our bench is clean, housekeeping, welfare facilities. Who's looking after that? It shouldn't just be left to the end of the night when the cleaners come in. It should be looked at throughout the day. So feel free to walk around and look at those areas. Behavioural change. So setting examples on health and safety. Health and safety behaviour is really, really important. So creating that culture and being vigilant. So it shouldn't be, well, we've always done it like this. We've never had an accident. We've never had a fire. Oh, John's been here for 20 years. He's always taken the guard off that machine. That's just how he does it. Maybe there will be some feathers that are ruffled, but equally everybody needs to be treated the same, and health and safety behaviour needs to start from the top. Thinking about site audits and inspections, they could be done internally by the health and safety manager, department managers. Could be that you've got an audit schedule already. Do you have any external monitoring, audits and inspections? Do you actually have a regulator come around on a regular basis because of the industry that you're working with? Maybe thinking about looking at an external company that could review your documents, audits and inspections as well. In the same vein, reviewing performance and also reporting near misses would be really, really important. My view is that you report everything. You should have an incident and accident book and investigation procedure, and then everything from the small list of things is reported, and if it's signed off straight away, that's great, but it could be that you might have to refer back to that over months to come. And then encourage and sign off training. So think about training. Again, unfortunately, it's seen as a cost. Oh, that course is too expensive. You'll do it next month, or in a few months' time, we need to do X, Y, and Z. But think about allocating some budgets for training Certainly if it's compliance training, health and safety, fire safety, food safety, probably working at height, manual handling, first aid, but also more technical training. Maybe if you're in the construction industry, maybe if you're in engineering, those very specific courses that you need for those operatives to do that role. I thought this was necessary to put on there, really. We talked about some of the stats that came out last year. This is directly taken from that report. So key figures for Great Britain: 1.7 million workers are still suffering from a work-related illness. 822,000 workers have work-related stress, depression, or anxiety. You can read the figures there. Interestingly, 3/4 of the way down, 123 workers were killed in that year. That is coming down year on year. I think the previous year was around 130, and it was 140. And back in the 70s and 80s, it was over 500 and 600. So we are getting far better as a nation looking at health and safety. But it would be really great if you could share these figures, maybe download the poster that goes with these, and display that in the staff area so staff can see how you're doing against national figures. What can you do? Appoint a person that's competent and responsible for fire and safety in the organisation. Develop a health and safety policy and promote a positive culture. Lead from the top, we've already talked about it, and involve all levels of staff. Think about your health and safety management system. As we said earlier, there's a number of digital platforms you can get. We've got one that we'd be happy to share. Equally, I still see in really good and proactive organisations the old 7 folders for health and safety, fire, check sheets, training, and the like. If they're reviewed and signed off regularly, there's nothing wrong with that. Think about your statutory compliance. What do you need to do on an annual basis? Gas safety, electrical safety, insurance, first aid, health and safety checks, equipment, things like that. So reviewing your statutory compliance, fire controls on a regular basis. Make sure you've got the correct permits and tickets or certificates for your industry. If you're getting someone new to use maybe a digger or a mute or a piece of equipment, are they allowed to do that? Have they been particularly trained, supervised, instructed? Have they got the tickets for that to do that? They're not supposed to do it without that necessary equipment checks and things like that. Risk assessments we've talked about. Are they reviewed? Make sure they're not generic. Make sure they do reflect your business. And if the business changes, the equipment changes, please make sure they're done again. Train staff in safety measures. It's really, really important that we're not just saying to someone, well, can you just go and do so-and-so? Can you shadow somebody else? Make sure they're properly trained. Training doesn't have to be a recognised classroom course. Training could be an online course. It could be training from somebody in the organisation if they're competent. But make sure that training is signed off and the worker agrees that they've had significant training to do what you're being asked to do. Develop safe systems of work. If you're not sure what they are, a safe system of work or a safe working instruction would be a document that would then tell somebody how to complete that task, activity, job, or something you're asking them to do. It's kind of an extension of the risk assessment. You might have heard of RAMs, risk assessment method statements. They're all kind of doing a similar thing, but different industries use different acronyms. But safe systems of work would sit alongside the risk assessment. As a director, do you understand them? Have you ever seen them? Can you review them? Look at the culture we've talked about. Emergency procedures, are they in place? Are they reviewed? Are they practiced? Absolutely investigate accident incidents and near misses. Look at equipment, chemicals, processes and people. And just see all this as a positive thing, because it could save you, one, a lot of money, but the image you're going to get from doing it will be great, especially if you can broadcast that, but also the staff you're going to keep in place would also be really good as well. So this is my last poll. I think Rebecca has got a fourth one, but the last question would be, are you concerned, and again, this could be in your role or as a director, are you concerned that you're not doing enough to influence health and safety in your organisation? And I'll hand back to Rebecca for this poll.
Thanks, Dom. So you should all have the poll on your screens now. If you can answer yes or no to this question, please. Okay, we're just getting a lot of responses in. It's looking like it's quite split almost at the minute. Okay, so as I say, it's very close on this one. So we've got 46% say yes and 54% say no. So almost an even split there, Dom.
Yeah, so great. For the 46% of you, brilliant. Things are obviously in place, regular reviews, maybe health and safety is part of those board meetings. It's the 54% of you that are actively saying, Sorry, it's the other way around, isn't it? Yes,
Yeah, it'll
yes,
be the other way
46%.
around.
Sorry, yeah, yeah.
They're very
So yes,
similar.
46% of you are concerned about health and safety in the organisation. So it's really thinking about what you're going to do about that. Who can you talk to? Can you bring it up into meetings? I know we'd be more than happy to talk to anybody individually about how we could be involved to share advice, good practice, and maybe come on board as a consultancy. For the 54% of you, it sounds like things are working well. You've got health and safety nailed, and all that is great. As an extension to that would be, how can we help you? We run something called a statutory compliance audit, which takes 2 to 3 hours. I would come into the business and look at all of your statutory compliance components with a health and safety director or site safety manager or position alike, produce a report, and then gives you a pathway then to think about what you need to do over the short, medium and long-term goals. We can also produce site audits. We can come in and spend a day with you, look at the workplace, warehouse, whatever it might be, car parks, offices, overview some of your risk assessments and give you an honest and feedback in terms of reports. We do on-site health, safety and fire audits as well. Fire risk assessment is a legal requirement under the fire safety order. Really, you shouldn't be doing them yourself unless it's a very, very, very basic organisation. Should be a competent, trained and qualified fire risk assessor. Generally, it takes a day, if not 2 days, to come in and do that piece of work, share the report and help you with the findings. We offer training, level 2 health and safety, level 2 fire safety, along with, as I've already said, first aid, mental health and safeguarding. We can help you with the support and creation of risk assessments, documents and checklists. And as I've said, we've also got a digital health and safety platform that we'd be happy to share. It's very, very cost effective, but it's also very effective as well. Just think about training. I've identified three training courses that I think are very, very good. NEBOSH, the National Examining Board for Safety and Health, you might have heard of. It's the kind of the holy grail and the standard for health and safety consultants. They do a one-day health and safety certificate in health and safety leadership. I've done this course. It's very, very good. It's recognised by the HSE. It's a 7-hour course with a further 3 or 4 hours of private study, and you submit a case study and take a short exam. It looks at health and safety leadership, moral, legal and financial reasons, the different links in safety leadership and culture, different leadership styles, and then looks at the HSE's model of effective health and safety, and largely everything we've been talking about over the last hour. So it'd be worth looking at NEBOSH as a one-day training course for directors. IOSH, the Institute of Safety and Health, also do an executive and directors course. I've done this one as well. This is equally as good. It's not dissimilar to NEBOSH. Again, it looks at more the models of how to do things: plan, do, check, act model, monitoring health and safety performance, planning, and performance. And if you're in the construction industry, I did this course back in January, and actually my client, this is interesting, put every one of their directors, board members and senior leaders on this course together. There were 16 of us that did this with a director trainer from the CITB coming down and delivering it. It was brilliant. The reason it was so good was because the whole team, and I'll include myself in that, did it together. And all the case studies and group work, we were then aligned with the company. And he actually looked at the company's health and safety policy, aims, objectives, tools, and various different assessments as live documents in that training. So it was excellent. So the CITB, the Construction Industry Training Board, you might, if for those of you who are part of that industry, you will have heard of Site Safety Plus and SMSTS and things like that. This is the director course of that. It's a one-day course delivered in the workplace, and it's equally great. So there's three courses there that I've done that I thought I'd share. We are bang on time, so we're going to skip the questions. And as I said, we've got a variety of questions that have come in. We will produce an FAQ document that will come out from everybody that's been on the call. So I appreciate that. There's a number of upcoming webinars there. I've got one next Thursday on fire safety and law. There's others coming up with reference to safeguarding, return to work, managing effective redundancy programs and working with trade unions over the next few months. Please do go on and register for our newsletter on the link there, because it talks about upcoming webinars, and they're free to join, as you know, and they're very, very useful. Management courses, we run the ILM level 3 and level 5. There's some dates that start in September. So if you've got colleagues that want to do the level 3, please contact us, because level 3 starts in September, and then level 5 starts around the same time but runs through to the end of November. And there's some courses that I'm undertaking. That course now has been cancelled, unfortunately, the level 2 fire safety, but we are running mental health and health and safety in October and November. And again, if you just let us know, you can also find those on our website as well. If you've got any further questions, please do just email us to inquiries@hrsolutions.uk.com. And Rebecca, I think, takes those emails with her colleague Drew, and they'll put them through to me, and we'll obviously produce. We'll give it maybe 7 days, and we'll produce some questions and responses, and get that out to everybody as well. I'll hand back to Rebecca because I think she might have a further poll and just to finish everything. But just like to say thank you for attending. I hope you found it useful. If you're a director, please heed the advice because you don't want those fines. And if you want to contact me, please do so. And have a great day.
Thank you, Dom. Yep, just to run the last part of the session then, just see if any of the attendees today would like to find out more about our services. As Dom discussed, we can offer health and safety consultancy and training if any of those issues we talked about today are relevant to you or you're concerned about it. But we also offer HR training, consultancy and payroll services as well. So just let us know if you'd like to find out more about any of those, and we'll be in touch. But thank you all for your participation in the webinar. And as we say, we'll come back to questions within sort of a week or so of this webinar. Brilliant. Thanks very much.